When did the views surpass 20,000? At the beginning of the livestream, I remember seeing only 10 people in the room. Chen Ji raised the phone up to the ceiling, but the signal was still weak. The chat was lagging badly. One moment, he could not even load a single comment, but suddenly, he would be overwhelmed by a ton. He could barely make sense of anything. 20,000 views but less than 5,000 followers, this ratio is a bit lacking. Chen Ji used his phone to snap pictures of the few pieces of paper that had been used in the pen spirit game. He then turned the camera to capture the broken ballpoint pen that sat in the middle of the chair. Dear viewers, can you see this? I have played the pen spirit game until the pen itself committed suicide. Aren't you going to follow me? Do you know how much I'm risking being here? An unknown host like myself, without equipment or a team. I'm here all alone, threading the line of danger. I know my equipment is not that great, and I can't even interact with you in chat, but I can lead you into the most authentic supernatural experience. This is definitely one of a kind and cannot be copied. After giving his speech, the number of followers started to rise. For Chen Ji, he was merely completing the Black Phone's mission, but it was a different concern from the viewer's perspective. Especially in comparison to Qin Guang's livestream. Even though Chen Ji was lacking in terms of equipment, his content was inimitable, whether from the aspect of danger or spectacle. The key to a successful livestream was none other than freshness and creativity. Qin Guang's team relied on a finished script, and they even had an actor to play the part. However, no matter how realistic the actor's acting was, it would appear forced. However, Chen Ji's content was very different, even Chen Ji himself did not know what would happen next. Thank you for your support. That was the pen spirit game, please do not try this at home. Alright, now we shall move on to the next location. Looking at the popularity that was still rising, Chen Ji was overjoyed. In any case, since he had to finish these missions dispensed by the Black Phone, why not make use of them fully and convert them into popularity? I wonder what is happening inside the chat room, but a rising popularity is a good thing. At least my risk of coming here tonight is not going to waste. The easy completion of the first side mission gave Chen Ji a boost of confidence. He put on his raincoat and left the dormitory. He had done everything he could there, so there was no point in staying. There are 3 side missions left: the sealed classroom, the deep well, and the 5th cubicle in the toilet. The 5th cubicle in the toilet appeared to be inside the education block. Chen Ji had been to the dormitory's toilets, and they only had 4 cubicles. If the office building's layout was similar to the dormitories, then only the education block's toilets fit the mission description. Chen Ji glanced at his phone. He had arrived at Muyang High School at 8 p.m. Technically, the pen spirit game should not have taken too long, but the time showed that it was now almost 9 p.m. There are 3 hours left until midnight. 1 hour for each mission should be fine. Chen Ji's plan was to finish all the side missions as soon as possible and find a corner to hide in until dawn arrived. When he stood before the education block again, Chen Ji had a weird feeling that the thing that sat before him was not an abandoned building but a giant coffin that housed plenty of dead bodies. The side mission did not specify the exact location of the toilet. There are 3 stories to this block, and this means that any one of the toilets on the 3 levels could be my mission location. Chen Ji turned on his flashlight and entered the building. Passing through empty classrooms at night caused Chen Ji's skin to crawl. He was afraid that once he turned, he would see something that shouldn't exist inside the classroom. He rushed toward the end of the corridor and entered the first floor's toilet. The place was spared from the fire and the interior remained the same as it was several years ago. The flooring was cracked and weeds could be seen peeking through the cracks. There were a brownish stain on the wall and the sole window in the room was creaking eerily. Focus on the mission, there's no time to waste. All of the toilets inside the education block had 6 cubicles. Years of abandonment meant that most of cubicle doors were broken and Chen Ji could look into the cubicles without even opening the door. With the mallet in his hand, Chen Ji walked past the 6 cubicles. The earlier 4 cubicles had nothing wrong about them, but the 5th and 6th cubicles caught his attention. The doors to these 2 cubicles were shut, and with a slight push, Chen Ji realized with a start that they were locked. Normally, the door is locked only because someone is occupying the cubicle. However, that could not be true here. The school has been abandoned for 3 years already. Even if something is occupying the cubicles, it cannot be human. In any case, I'd better take a closer look. Chen Ji smashed at the 6th door with his mallet, and the door fell open. Before Chen Ji could react, several dark shadows charged at him. What is that? He jumped back to avoid them. He shone his flashlight at his assailant, and Chen Ji was embarrassed to realize it was merely the cleaning equipment. After recovering from the fake scare, Chen Ji picked the mops and brooms off the floor and shoved them back into the cubicle. He found the same thing in the next cubicle. All 6 of the cubicles on the first floor were normal, which meant that his mission venue was on another floor. After exiting the toilet, Chen Ji looked over his shoulder with uncertainty. The cubicle doors creaked on their hinges like people waving at him. This would create quite a scary effect inside the haunted house. Chen Ji made a mental note to remember this for the future and headed up the stairs to the second floor. It had the same layout as the first floor toilet, but the window was boarded up. Once Chen Ji stepped into the space, he felt weirdly pressured. This should be the place then. Probably because the window was boarded up, the toilet was better preserved than the first floor one. There was not much change compared to how it was several years ago. He walked to the first cubicle, and before even pushing the door open, he heard footsteps coming from the corridor outside. However, due to the interruption from the rain, he could not really tell for sure. Is someone running in the corridor? He hid in a corner of the toilet and raised his mallet in a guarded posture in case someone decided to rush into the room. Nothing like that happened. As time moves toward midnight, the school is slowly starting to change, like it is coming alive. Looks like I will need to pick up my pace. Chen Ji stopped hesitating and pushed open the first 4 cubicles in one go. When he stood before the 5th cubicle, the footsteps in the corridor started again, and he heard it clearly this time. There were 2 sets of footsteps. The mission description for the 5th cubicle in the toilet stated that a red shadow would appear at midnight. Was that it? However, the mission was described in first person, stating that someone hid themselves in the 5th cubicle to capture the red shadow that appeared at midnight. However, what happened next was an unknown, leaving Chen Ji plenty of room to imagine. He switched off the flashlight and thought to himself, the mission states that a red shadow will appear in the toilet at midnight, but the footsteps clearly show that there were 2 people walking side by side. Could it be that the red shadow has found a new friend in the years that it was trapped in this abandoned school? The footsteps were slowly approaching the second floor toilet. Following the mission requirement, Chen Ji should hide inside the 5th cubicle, but Chen Ji felt that was too dangerous. He would have effectively trapped himself. Perhaps I should act more proactively. Chen Ji hid behind the toilet door, and no matter who it was, he would start by whacking them on their head. Chen Ji took a deep breath before holding it in and raising the mallet above his head. The footsteps became clearer and clearer. It sounded like 2 individuals running side by side. They were dangerously close to the second floor bathroom. The wait was real torture for Chen Ji. He had no idea what was outside and had even less of a clue what they were planning to do. All he could do was make himself as silent as possible. Several seconds later, the footsteps finally stopped before the toilet entrance. Here they come. Chen Ji's hand that gripped the mallet had started to sweat, and his heart was racing at an impossible rate. The storm continued to brew outside, and the rain seeped into the room, wetting the toilet floor. Where are they? Chen Ji turned to look over his shoulder. There were no human faces staring down at him like he had expected. His patience was wearing thin. With one hand on the doorknob, he prepared to lean out to take a look. However, before he could do that, a flash of lightning tore apart the sky, and utilizing the temporary brightness, Chen Ji saw 2 shadows reflected on the toilet floor. They're standing at the entrance. His body froze, and since his flashlight had already been switched off, he could see nothing in the darkness of the toilet. The shadows were short, like 2 children. He did not dare to let his guard down. After waiting for several seconds, the footsteps resumed. However, unlike what he had expected, the owners of the footstep did not enter the toilet but went down the staircase next to it and down to the first floor. Leaving just like that. Chen Ji slowly moved out from behind the door. He turned to look at the entrance, and there was nothing there. The thing that stood at the door earlier felt like 2 children. This is different from the red shadow described by the black phone. Is this because too much time has passed since then, or did my early arrival at the school mess up the schedule? Chen Ji could not figure out the answer. Switching the flashlight back on, Chen Ji wandered over to the 5th cubicle. Regardless, he had to inspect the cubicle to see whether it was the actual mission venue. The door opened to reveal an old yet completely normal space. Based on the situation thus far, the mission venue should be in the 3rd floor toilet. The 2 children from earlier have run down to the 1st floor, so this is the perfect chance. Chen Ji turned to walk out the toilet. Before he reached the threshold, his phone rang. It was an unknown caller. Whose number is this? Chen Ji did not have many friends, and the few he had would not normally contact him. After a brief hesitation, Chen Ji retreated to the corner and exited the live stream to answer the phone. Hello. Are you Ru Xiu's classmate? I hear you came across a strange boy whom you suspect is suffering from a psychological problem. The voice on the other end of the phone had a gravity to it. It exuded an air of confidence. I did, and you are. I am Ru Xiu's father. He did mention giving Chen Ji's phone number to Gao Rushui earlier. Looks like this senior of his did things with efficiency. Do you mind telling me about the boy in greater detail? Psychological illness is not unlike a venom inside one's body. If one does not remove it as soon as possible, it might ruin that boy's future. Gao Ruxiu's father was familiar with the potential danger of psychological problems. From his perspective, a psychological illness could be more dangerous than many physical illnesses. There is this boy about 7 or 8. He's physically fine, but he appears to have withdrawn from the world. He refuses to interact with others and is afraid of sunlight. Are there any other symptoms? If possible, can you give me them in detail? I met this boy at the entrance of a haunted house park attraction. His aunt told me that the boy likes to spend time inside haunted houses. Normal emotions that one should experience inside a haunted house like fear and anxiety were missing from the boy. In fact, he appeared to be more comfortable in the darkness than under the sunlight. It gave me the impression that darkened corners give him a sense of security. Chen Ji voiced the speculation that he had. If he had not met the child in person, he would not have believed that such a curious boy existed. A boy of 7 or 8 who likes to visit haunted houses and doesn't feel afraid. Yes, the boy even showed interest in the actor who was in a dead person's makeup. There was silence on the other end of the phone for a few seconds. If it is just a lack of fear, it could be autism, which could be responsible for the damage to the amygdala of his brain. I'm sorry, but I don't think I understand. To put it simply, the amygdala is the central nervous system where memory is processed and stored. It is also responsible for the production of emotions like rage and fear. If one's amygdala is damaged, even if facing a lion or viper, one wouldn't be afraid, much less being scared inside a haunted house. Gao Ruxiu's father had a point, but Chen Ji still felt the description did not quite fit Fan Yu's conditions. Dr. Gao, it is by no means that the boy is not afraid of anything. For one, he is afraid of sunlight and hates walking under the sun also. He was not only unafraid of the haunted house, he liked the environment inside it. It felt like he was a completely different boy inside and outside of the haunted house. Chen Ji thought about it before adding, he was completely silent when he was outside the haunted house and refused to have interaction with others, but he was energized when inside the haunted house. When it was time to leave, his refusal to leave was vehement, and I saw him injure his aunt with my own eyes. Listening to your description, it might also be a sign of bipolar disorder, highly destructive and irrational when angered but highly individualistic and retreats into his own world when depressed. Teacher Gao shared his analysis with Chen Ji. But one point still eludes me. Patients with bipolar disorder might be triggered at any given moment, and there shouldn't be a clear trigger like being inside or outside a haunted house. My personal opinion is that since the boy's attitude change is related to haunted houses, then the source of his problem should be related to a haunted house as well. Did he suffer from any trauma inside a haunted house when he was young? Or did his parents work at a haunted house? After hearing the analysis from Gao Ruxiu's father, a speculation appeared in Chen Ji's mind. The boy's changes in personality happened inside his haunted house, and the biggest difference his haunted house had compared to others was that his haunted house was really haunted. Fan Yu likes to visit haunted houses because he likes the company of ghosts. Chen Ji came to this unlikely answer after listening to all of Teacher Gao's reasoning. I don't dare diagnose this patient so easily. If you have time, you can bring him to see me. Teacher Gao also had not come across such a patient before, and he wished to inspect him in person. Psychological illnesses are very complicated, and there are too many uncertainties to their causes. It could be related to the boy's living environment, personal trauma, or even genetic inheritance. Chen Ji did not answer. When he came up with the conclusion that Fan Yu liked the company of ghosts, an extremely scary thought cropped up in his mind. He peeled open his raincoat to retrieve Fan Yu's drawing from inside his pocket. The Black House and the Red Little Humans. Before arriving at Muyang High School, Chen Ji had assumed that this referred to one of the buildings at the school, but none of the building there fitted Fan Yu's drawing. If anything, the squat dilapidated room shared by Fan Yu and his aunt had a closer resemblance to the drawing. If Fan Yu is really drawing about the house he's living in and these red people, even the hairs on Chen Ji's arms stood on end. Fan Yu's house is filled with ghosts. He was reminded of the scene when he went to visit Fan Yu that morning. The aunt had been incredibly worried while Fan Yu locked himself up in his bedroom with the door and window closed, his head lowered, fully focused on his drawing. Every time, he only used the two colors, red and black. All of his drawings were about a black house and red people, but each drawing had a slight difference. Chen Ji's lips paled. He clearly remembered that the position of the red people was different in every drawing. He had originally thought that was Fan Yu just scribbling, but now thinking back, they represented the dirty things moving inside the house. Fan Yu can see them. Chen Ji sucked in a cold breath, and more details from when Fan Yu was inside his haunted house continued to surface. When Chen Ji was talking to the little boy, the latter had kept looking behind Chen Ji, especially at his shadow. Fan Yu had said 2 sentences inside the haunted house, and both of them had been directed at Chen Ji. At the time, Chen Ji had assumed that the kid had taken a liking to him, but now he realized that the boy probably treated him as kindred spirit. No wonder he's afraid of sunlight and likes to visit haunted house. The boy's perception has been seriously twisted. Chen Ji gripped the phone tightly. He did not know why Fan Yu had turned out that way, but the boy's various curious actions and the testimony from the woman had led Chen Ji to a scary speculation. In a similarly rainy night a few years ago, the boy had disappeared. Tragedy had befallen his parents after they went to look for him. To be able to kill 2 grown adults and deal with their bodies and crime scene on a stormy night required plenty of careful planning and preparation. Although, viewing this from another perspective, if someone did have the intention to harm Fan Yu's parents, why would a killer with the ability to hide the bodies perfectly and clear their every trace from the crime scene let Fan Yu go? When his aunt told Fan Yu that his parents had gone to heaven, Fan Yu had examined the well closely because he said that heaven was inside the well. This meant that he knew his parents' bodies were inside the well. He had seen everything, he was one of the witnesses, so the killer had no reason to let him live. Chen Ji narrowed his eyes slightly as a chill coursed through his body. That is unless the killer knew the boy or was the boy himself. Regardless of which one it was, either possibility made Chen Ji's heart cold with fear. The aunt herself was also a prime suspect. There were way too many plot holes in her story, and when she supposedly went into the kitchen to pour water for Chen Ji, she should not have wasted so much time in there. Then, during the conversation, and even before he left, she had kept reminding Chen Ji to take a sip of the water. At the time, Chen Ji had been too focused on his mission to be careful of her kindness, but thinking back, he suspected that something had been done to that glass of water. If it was the aunt who killed Fan Yu's parents, what was her motive? The woman loved Fan Yu to the extent of pampering him. She was blessed with beauty but did not seem to keep up her appearances. It was obvious that it was not easy for her to raise Fan Yu alone. She even spared no expenses to take him to see many doctors. She had put her whole life on hold for Fan Yu's sake. Would such a kind woman really be the killer? To be honest, the thin woman had left a good impression on Chen Ji. He thought she was independent and strong. Then again, if she was not the killer, then the next prime suspect would be the boy himself. He was the crime's only witness and survivor. Chen Ji did not suspect him initially because he was just a child, but after knowing the secret behind his drawings, Chen Ji realized he had greatly underestimated this child. Fan Yu had a pair of unique eyes, and his constant company was only ghosts. He was not scared by their presence but, in fact, managed to survive just fine. Chen Ji even suspected that he had the ability to control them. This would sound preposterous to others, but not to Chen Ji because he himself was the specter's favored. But if the boy is the killer, what was his motive? This was the question that stumped Chen Ji the most. Neither the boy nor the aunt had any actual reason to murder their close family. What really happened on that day? Fan Yu's parents were ultimately dropped inside Muyang High School as well, but why Muyang High School of all places? When Chen Ji placed the drawing back inside his pocket, he realized that the call was still connected, so he immediately apologized to Dr. Gao. "I'm so sorry, my attention was otherwise distracted." "No worries, I was just flipping through the journals to find out more about the patient. In fact, I'm really interested in his case. Do you mind bringing him to see me when there's an opportunity?" Gao Ruxiu's father had not hung up, he had waited patiently for Chen Ji. "Of course, should the opportunity arise, we will definitely visit you. Thank you, this number is my personal number, so call me when you're coming. Lastly, I have something to remind you. Teacher Gao sounded like he was hesitating on the phone, as if he was deciding whether he should say something or not. What is it? Chen Ji was appreciative of any advice from this kind doctor. The way to treat a patient is with plenty of patience, but it is undeniable that serious patients carry with them a certain degree of threat. When you are in their company, please remember to try not to incite them. For the sake of the child's future recovery and your personal safety, please be careful. I understand. After hanging up the phone, Chen Ji leaned against the toilet's wall. His mind was a clotted mess. If the killer was not Fan Yu, then it had to be Fan Yu's aunt. They were the prime suspects but also the victim's closest family. In any case, it is certain that Fan Yu's aunt is hiding something from me. Something else must have happened that rainy night several years ago. Their closest family turning into their killer, this was a mystery that stumped Chen Ji. The crime scene was at Muyang High School, perhaps I can find some clues here. Chen Ji reopened the livestream. The chat was still lagging, but at least the footage had gotten much clearer. After apologizing quickly to his viewers, Chen Ji walked out of the second-floor toilet with his mallet in hand. He stood at the door and waved his flashlight at the floor. There was not anything like footprints. When I was hiding behind the toilet door earlier, I really did hear footsteps. They stopped before the toilet entrance, but the lack of footprints suggests that the owners of the footsteps are not living humans. Chen Ji glanced down the stairs. Last he heard, the sets of footsteps did head downstairs. Chen Ji was unsure whether the footsteps belonged to the red shadow mentioned in the mission or not, but for the sake of safety, he decided to avoid it for now. Brandishing his flashlight, Chen Ji headed up to the third floor. However, when he was at the landing between second and third floor, the sound of footsteps reverberated in his ears again. They seemed to be coming from the first floor. Two people standing side by side were heading upstairs. Have they discovered me? Chen Ji immediately switched off his flashlight, stuck his back to the wall, and stared closely at the mouth of the staircase. The footsteps did not stop, and they walked onto the second floor. It sounds like they're heading into the second-floor toilet. Just as this thought crossed Chen Ji's mind, the sound of cubicle doors being opened appeared beside his ears. The cubicle doors were opened one after another, 6 times. They seemed to be checking the toilet cubicles. Chen Ji leaned closer to the railing and tried to poke his head out to take a closer look at the situation on the second floor. After the cubicle doors stopped moving, so did the footsteps. It appeared like everything Chen Ji had heard earlier was part of his imagination. He waited for 5 minutes on the stairs but could not hear any weird sounds coming from the second-floor toilet anymore. The lack of footsteps means that the walking spirits are now inside the toilet. They're probably hiding in one of the cubicles, waiting to ambush me. Chen Ji might have a powerful heart, but it did not mean that he had no fear. A surprise from inside the toilet cubicle would probably scare him quite a bit. Since the spirit is now hiding inside the second-floor toilet, it's the perfect opportunity for me to check out the third floor. Chen Ji did not turn on his flashlight. Thanks to the yin-yang fission, the reward he had received from completing a nightmare mission, even though it was not as magical as described by the black phone, it did greatly improve his sight, enabling him to see better than most at night. In the darkened night, thunder flashed occasionally across the sky, giving Chen Ji a temporary glimpse of his surroundings. It created an eerie atmosphere. He feared that one of the lightning flashes might enable him to see things that he did not want to. Chen Ji looked left and right several times as he stood at the entrance to the third-floor toilet. There was nothing in sight, so Chen Ji stepped into the toilet. The third floor's toilet was even more curious than the ones on the first and second floors. The window was boarded up and the walls were unstained. The place seemed to have been abandoned even before the school was closed down. All 6 cubicles were closed, giving Chen Ji a strange feeling that every single of them was hiding a scary surprise. The 5th and 6th cubicles in the first-floor toilet were closed because they were storage rooms for cleaning supplies. Could that be the case again? Chen Ji walked to the first cubicle and leaned toward the door. There was no sound coming from within, definitely no crying of babies or giggles of girls like he had anticipated. Then, he did something even braver. He knelt on the floor and peered through the bottom opening. Empty. There were no random items like mops or brooms, nor was there a pair of legs, it was just a normal cubicle. Chen Ji tried pushing the door and it opened easily. The cubicle was extremely clean. If not for the layer of dust on every surface, he would have believed that this place was cleaned daily. The whole education block looks like it was burned down in a fire, but this toilet shows no signs of burning. This is similar to that classroom on the first floor. This similarity attracted Chen Ji's attention. That basically confirms that this is my mission venue. He pushed open the other cubicles before stopping at the fifth. I have a very bad feeling. Could there be a nasty surprise waiting for me behind this door? Chen Ji patted the doll inside his shirt pocket and used his mallet to shove the door open. The door fell open, and when he saw what was inside the cubicle, Chen Ji took an involuntary step back. Drawings of eyes covered every surface inside the fifth cubicle, their sizes similar to actual human eyes. Before opening the door, Chen Ji had tried to envision what could appear behind the door. Perhaps it might be pale-faced girl or a scary monster or madman covered with blood, but he definitely did not anticipate this. Why are there so many eyes on the walls and boards? This creepy discovery sent a chill down Chen Ji's spine. He felt like there were innumerable eyes looking at him. His legs were shaking as he stood outside the cubicle. One could imagine how unsettling it would be inside. Which psycho did this and why? The pairs of eyes felt like they were peeping on the people inside the cubicle. Shuddering, Chen Ji hurriedly closed the door again. It felt very unsettling being stared at by so many pairs of eyes even though they were mere drawings. I found the mission venue, but how am I supposed to find this quest? Hide inside the cubicle with all the eyes staring at me while waiting for the red shadow to arrive. Isn't that asking for a bit too much? Chen Ji stared at the cubicle for a long time before moving to the sixth cubicle. He found the same drawing of eyes inside the sixth cubicle. However, different from the fifth cubicle, the eyes in the sixth cubicle were only drawn on the wall and partition that was shared with the fifth cubicle. The other walls were completely clean. Chen Ji was weirded out by the single painted wall in the sixth cubicle. He returned to the fourth cubicle, and he was right, there were no doodles in the fourth cubicle. Could it be a mere prank from the students? But why did they pick the fifth cubicle? It's not the first one or the last one. To get to the truth, Chen Ji returned to the sixth cubicle. He hesitated before walking into it. The water pipes all ran through the sixth cubicle, so the space was much smaller compared to the other cubicles. There's nothing worth noting here. Do I need to enter the fifth cubicle for the mission to progress? Chen Ji looked at the eyes on the wall before raising his finger to lightly touch them. They look scary, but they're just drawings. He was locked in a staring match with the eyes on the wall for a long time. The fourth cubicle is normal, the drawings are only in the fifth and sixth cubicle. This partition is unique because it's covered with drawing of the eyes on both sides. Something slowly clicked in Chen Ji's mind. He used his finger to slowly move through every drawing on the wall. When his finger touched one of the eyes that was next to his knees, Chen Ji's expression shifted. It is as I predicted. He squatted down and flashed some light on the partition. Underneath his finger was a peephole the size of a human pupil. A small hole had been gauged into the wall. Since its size was similar to an actual pupil and it was hiding in the corner, it was difficult to discover. All the other eyes are to hide this single peephole. As Chen Ji looked at the peephole in the wall, he felt weirdly unsettled. The peephole connects the fifth and sixth cubicles, meaning someone once used this peephole to spy on the person inside the fifth cubicle from the sixth cubicle. Who would have thought of the many eyes that surrounded the walls? One of them would be real. Since the pipes are gathered in the sixth cubicle, as long as the peeping Tom climbed on top of the pipes, he wouldn't be discovered even if someone peeked in from underneath the door. The man had it all thought out. Being looked at in the dark made Chen Ji feel very uncomfortable. Thinking about the mission description, the person that hid in the fifth cubicle was the victim of the peeping Tom, which could be the red shadow. Now that the secret of the fifth cubicle has been solved, how do I complete the mission? Do I have to stay inside the fifth cubicle for the red shadow to spy on me? Chen Ji waved the mallet in the air. If that was supposed to happen, he would not mind smashing the red shadow's eye blind. Just as Chen Ji was trying to figure out how to complete the mission, the set of footsteps started again in the corridor and they were speeding toward the third floor. What's happening? The footsteps are more urgent than before. Is it because I opened the fifth cubicle? But that does not sound right. I opened the cubicle much earlier, so why are they rushing over now? Before he could come up with an answer, the footsteps had already arrived at the third floor. Chen Ji was standing inside the sixth cubicle, so his only choice was to step into the cubicle and close the door. The moment he did, the footsteps entered the third floor bathroom. Finally, the time has come. Chen Ji switched off his flashlight and raised his mallet. However, what happened next completely surprised him. After the footsteps entered the toilet, the being did not check the cubicle one after another but headed for the fifth cubicle directly. After the door of the cubicle next to him was closed, the toilet suddenly became very quiet. They're just beside me, but isn't the order a bit messed up? According to the mission requirement, it should be me inside the fifth cubicle, right? The silence persisted. After the owners of the footsteps entered the fifth cubicle, there were no more sounds. After waiting for another 10 minutes, Chenji's interest in the person next door was slowly piqued. He glanced at the peephole on the wall before squatting down and leaned toward it. The black peephole seemed to have a magical attraction, drawing Chenji closer to it. On the other end of the peephole was not a bloodshot eye or a red shadow but two kids about the age of 3 or 4. The boy and the girl hid themselves beside the toilet, holding each other's hands. They looked intensely worried. Shouldn't it be a red shadow? Where did these two kids come from? Chenji pulled his gaze back. The two children next door could not be described with the word scary. Another side mission related to the well mentions a brother and sister. Since the deep well is related to Fan Yu, could these two be the aunt's son and daughter? But why would they appear here? And they look like they are being chased by something. A series of questions appeared in his mind. Chenji gripped the mallet tightly. If his opponent was these two children, he had confidence he could win. I should wait a little longer. I have a feeling that things aren't that simple. The night darkened, and suddenly, the silence in the third-floor toilet was shattered by a new set of footsteps that came from the corridor. Chenji pulled the cubicle door open a sliver and looked out. When the footsteps stopped at the toilet entrance, a faded red shadow was reflected on the tiles on the toilet wall. It's finally here. Chenji's mission target had finally arrived. He did not dare to breathe as his eyes were staring at the door. The sound of footsteps became clearer, signifying that the red shadow had entered the third-floor toilet. Creak. The first cubicle's door was pulled open, and Chenji saw a blurry red shadow poke its head into the cubicle. It stopped for a long time before moving to the second cubicle. This was the first time in his life that Chenji felt the sound of door opening was so grating. Very soon, the doors to the second, third, and fourth cubicles were pulled open and the red shadow stopped before the fifth cubicle. Watching this unfold, Chenji tensed up. His body was like a pressed spring, about to explode at any moment. If he had followed the mission's instructions, he would have been the one inside the fifth cubicle, and what the red shadow was about to do inside the fifth cubicle would be the thing that should have happened to him. In the silent and dark toilet, the red shadow gripped the door of the fifth cubicle and slowly pulled it open. The room felt like it had turned darker. Children's cries and laughter appeared from the cubicle next door. The red shadow stood at the door but did not go in. It looked left and right before moving to the last cubicle. From the sliver of the door that was left ajar, Chenji saw the red shadow stop before the sixth cubicle. There was just a thin partition between them. Time seemed to have slowed down for the imminent confrontation. Several seconds later, the red shadow leaned toward the door and at the same time, Chenji raised his mallet. Chenji watched as the red shadow made contact with the door. As the door creaked open, every muscle in Chenji's body tensed. Before the door was completely opened, the red shadow had started to phase through the door. Facing the dangerous threat, Chenji's survival instinct caused him to smash his mallet on the red shadow, and in the same motion, he aimed a strong kick at the door. Bang! The decrepit cubicle door understandably could not withstand his assault. It flew off its hinges and slammed into the red shadow, which did not even have the chance to evade. The red shadow did not anticipate this, and its body started to blur as it rolled on the floor. Then it ran out of the toilet. Chenji gasped greedily for air. He had expected a fierce battle, but his opponent appeared to have a much weaker heart than he had anticipated. Chenji's sudden appearance seemed to have spooked it. Has the thing forgotten its ghostly identity? Chenji did not relax as he gripped the mallet tightly. After the red shadow made its escape, children's crying drifted out from the fifth cubicle. The two kids, who Chenji assumed to be the woman's children, were still inside the toilet. Stop crying. This was a common trope in scary movies. A creepy sound of tears that came from inside the toilet. It should have been scary, but with an angry warning from Chenji, the children's crying really did stop. He blocked the entrance of the fifth cubicle angrily. The two children had their hands over their lips, their pale faces filled with fear. Why are you two acting like the victims? Chenji's emotions were a bit out of control from the intense confrontation with the red shadow. His loud voice combined with the dangerous-looking mallet scared the two kids in the cubicle. They held each other's hands as they half crawled, half ran out of the toilet. Was I being a bit too harsh there? The two children could very well be Fan Yu's brother and sister. Whether it was for the Deep Well mission or to investigate the disappearance of Fan Yu's parents, he had to follow the two children. The two kids ran very fast while Chen Ji chased after them. They soon left the education block and entered the office building next to it. Chen Ji followed closely behind them. When he got onto the second floor, the two kids suddenly disappeared. Where did they go? The interior of the office building was different from the two other buildings at Muyang High School. The whole building had been spared from the fire and it was much cleaner. Chen Ji pushed open a random door and peeked in. The room had two tables and a bookshelf. There was flower pot sitting on the windowsill. They disappeared in the blink of an eye. Where could they be hiding? After walking deeper into the room, Chen Ji noticed a faded plaque lying on the floor. It read mathematics. All of the mathematics classes at Muyang High School were held in this one small room. Chen Ji soon realized why. After all, Muyang High School did not have that many students. They could easily fit into one room. Also, fewer students meant a smaller number of teachers. This room was probably the office for the mathematics teacher as well. He took a cursory look around the room. He discovered a rotten school bag inside the drawer of one of the tables. The bag was tiny and had cartoon prints on it. Chen Ji placed it on the table and opened the zipper. There was a cartoon coloring book and a box of crayons inside. Why would these things be inside the mathematics teacher's office? The contents of the school bag did not seem to be for high school students. Chen Ji surmised that the school bag probably belonged to the mathematics teacher's child, and the bag had been left behind for some reason. After opening the crayon box, Chen Ji realized that every color was there except red and black. Chen Ji was immediately reminded of Fan Yu. After flipping through the coloring book, Chen Ji's suspicion was further confirmed. All of the pages had the same drawing, a black house with two red small human figures. All of the drawings' backgrounds were the black house, but the position of the red people changed every time. Chen Ji pulled out Fan Yu's drawing from his pocket and placed it beside the coloring book. The comparison caused him to suck a light breath. At least the boy's painting style has remained the same after all these years. The drawings had given Chen Ji plenty of useful information. The rotten school bag and the spider webs that filled the drawer meant that the bag had been shoved inside the drawer way before Muyang High School was closed down. This meant that the boy had started to draw ghosts from a young age. His pair of eyes had probably been like that since birth. If the black house in the painting was his home, then starting from several years ago, two ghosts had been residing in the boy's home. Relating it to the aunt's testimony and what Chen Ji had seen earlier, the two ghosts were most likely the aunt's children. After living together for so long, the aunt must know that Fan Yu has a special vision. Chen Ji looked at the two red and black drawings. It is because she knew that she was so willing to bring Fan Yu to the haunted house. She probably pampers Fan Yu thusly because she is channeling her love for three children into that one boy. The appearance of Fan Yu's school bag also told Chen Ji another thing. This room likely belonged to Fan Yu's father. He was Muyang High School's mathematics teacher. From the conversation with Fan Yu's aunt, Chen Ji knew that Fan Yu's father had been fired from another school due to drinking. However, Fan Yu's aunt added that other schools rejected Fan Yu's father, and he had nowhere else to turn to, which was why he had ended up at Muyang High School. This made Chen Ji curious. What kind of mistake had Fan Yu's father made after drinking that would make him blacklisted from the entire school district and be shown the door by normal schools? At the time, Chen Ji had wanted to ask, but the topic had quickly been pushed aside by Fan Yu's aunt when she pulled out the mysterious photo. What kind of person was the missing father like? Chen Ji drummed the mallet on the table and thought. He continued to look through the room and finally found several paper notes inside an abandoned book on the bookshelf. Teacher Fan, we know what you did in the 6th cubicle of the 3rd floor's female toilets. We demand that you apologize to the girl immediately. And get out of this school. You have 2 nights to come to a decision. We want an open apology. This is your last night. If you insist on staying at this school, then you shall stay here forever. The peeping Tom is Fan Yu's father. Chen Ji never would have imagined that if he had not read the paper notes. Looks like I was right. Fan Yu's aunt has been hiding something crucial from me. When Chen Ji was trying to deduce the killer earlier, he had been missing a crucial element, a motive. The notes had provided him with a new line of inquiry. There are 3 notes, and they have different handwriting. This means that at least 3 people knew about teacher Fan's dirty secret. Chen Ji did not touch the notes inside the book. The paper was fragile from the passage of time, and he was afraid that his touch might ruin the key evidence. The handwriting on the paper is very clear. Teacher Fan kept these 3 notes probably to find the students by comparing the handwriting. After all, Muyang High School is small. With the convenience of being a member of staff, 3 days would have been more than enough time to inspect the handwriting of all the students at this school. Chen Ji memorized the contents of the notes. To be honest, he was rather curious as to how the 3 students discovered the secret of the cubicle. Were they all victims? But that does not seem like that from the tone of the notes, especially the last one. If you insist on staying at this school, then you shall stay here forever. That definitely doesn't sound like something a victim would say. The message communicated by the 3 notes was extremely clear, but their demand sounded rather juvenile to Chen Ji. The correct solution to deal with people like Fan Yu's father was to report to the police and not ask for something like a public apology. If anything, the exposure of the incident might exacerbate the situation, for it might cause further trauma to the victim. The content of these notes does sound like they came from students. Could they be the ones who tossed teacher Fan into the well? Chen Ji had the motive, but the timing was all wrong. There were 2 adults who disappeared that night. To be able to kill 2 adults and deal with their bodies without leaving any trace behind did not sound like something that was achievable for several teenage students. I must have missed something. Chen Ji tried to look at the situation from teacher Fan's perspective. An open apology was definitely out of question. If this thing was exposed, his life would be ruined. He already had a record before coming to Muyang High School, and the punishment for repeat offender would be serious. Fan Yu's father knew about that. It was why he had kept those paper notes. He had probably planned to sniff out the students who had threatened him and deal with them personally, but from the result, it seemed like his 3-day search came up with nothing. Here's the conclusion of everything I've found so far. These 3 notes came from different studies, but even after comparing the handwriting of the students at this school, Fan Yu's father came up with nothing. These 3 students discovered the secret of the 6th cubicle, but instead of reporting it to the police, they adopted the method that had the least effect and would easily expose them, which was to threaten teacher Fan directly. Lastly, the warning on the final note did come true. These 3 points made 0 sense to Chen Ji. To summarize, 3 students who could not be discovered found out about teacher Fan's peeping Tom habit and, after their warning failed, made teacher Fan disappear. Individual who fits these 3 criteria basically doesn't exist. However, Chen Ji already had quite a good idea about who the killer was, but he was still uncertain. The notes also mention a girl whom they want Fan Yu's father to apologize to. If I can find her, then many problems will be solved. After recording everything with his camera, Chen Ji shut the book and placed it back where it had been. If I did not stay to look through the drawers, I wouldn't have discovered these notes that are enclosed inside the book. Looks like to solve any mystery, everything starts with the details. Chen Ji exited the mathematics room and went through the other rooms but came up with nothing. It's already 10:30 p.m. There won't be enough time to complete the remaining 2 side missions if I continue to slug like this. Chen Ji exited the office with the flashlight. He searched the school ground for the well but could not find anything like that even after a 1-hour search in the rain. Where could this well be? The black foam cannot possibly be mistaken. Chen Ji's pants and shoes were drenched, and he looked positively haggard. There only half an hour left until midnight. I'll need to leave the well mission and find shelter. Chen Ji lowered his head to hide from the rain as he walked toward the education building. He wanted to reach the sealed classroom before midnight. If the mission was too difficult, the plan was to give up. Chen Ji's boots felt heavy from the water and every step left a clear footprint on the floor. After entering the education block, Chen Ji headed directly for the sealed classroom. Looking from outside the window, the single table in the middle of the room that had the textbook, pen, and paper on it did look weird. It looked stranger than I expected. Muyang High School had originally been a crematorium. Chen Ji read from the online threads that the sealed classroom was exactly the location of the crematorium's former morgue. It had powerful yin energy, and that was why the headmaster had kept the classroom sealed. Some said a school bus ran into a huge accident when they were out on a school trip. Many people died, but the spirits of the students still came back to school. The headmaster had to leave this classroom open to accommodate them. The last explanation was the most inspiring. Before Muyang High School was closed, the school was the worst school in Jiujiang. Their collective score was always first, counting from the bottom. To improve this situation, some of the staff suggested arranging the classes according to their results. The worse the result, the further to the back their class would be. However, this suggestion was vetoed by the headmaster, and he sealed the classroom to tell the students that no one was born in the last place, and labeling them as such would be a horrible mistake. There were many other rumors about the sealed classroom at Muyang High School, but Chen Ji could only remember these three, which were most discussed. He checked the time again. At 11:36 p.m., he opened the door and went into the sealed classroom. Chen Ji moved quickly, and his target was clear, which was to take a closer look at the things on the table at the center. When he entered the room, Chen Ji did not feel that the classroom was any different from outside, perhaps slightly quieter. Chen Ji looked at the textbook and the paper, but there was nothing notable written on them. However, when he picked up the textbook, he discovered there was plenty of writing carved into the wooden table. The writing was carved onto the table with the end of a pen. Each marking went deep into the surface and spoke of the writer's pain and desperation. The writings were all collected at the center of the table. Chen Ji bent down toward the table to get a closer look. The eyes on the toilet wall came alive. I saw it, the eyes were moving. I don't know why I would imagine that, but from that day onwards, I feel like a pair of eyes has been following me. They could be hiding anywhere, inside the drawer, under the bed, behind the pillow. I've lost the courage to even look inside my bag, afraid that a pair of eyes will look back at me. I'm afraid of being left alone. I don't dare enter tight spaces. I'm scared of the dark. The moment the lights are switched off, I scream, waking up from a nightmare. I believe I've lost my mind, and the pair of eyes is watching me slip down the spiral of insanity. What should I do? A pair of eyes is following me. They must be hiding somewhere, and they look familiar, but I cannot place them. I have told my parents and the class teacher about this, but they brushed me off, saying that I probably need to lay off the heavy studying. They are probably right. I'm probably too tired, or else why would I think the pair of eyes look so similar to the class teacher's eyes? My parents told the teacher to keep a tab on me, and I know they meant well, but whenever I'm close to the respected class teacher, I just want to grab a pen and jab his eyes blind. Have I finally gone off the deep end? I don't dare tell more people about this. I'm afraid of the eyes, and afraid that people might call me crazy. I pretend to laugh and smile like I used to, but the appearance of the eyes has gotten far more frequent. I don't know who I can trust. I feel like I'm breaking down. Horrible thoughts appear in my mind when I see needles or fruit knives. I find myself wailing for no reason. I want the tears to stop, but I can't control them. I know they are watching. This cannot go on any longer. I only seek release. I hope the rumors about this classroom are real. I am willing to give up everything just to destroy that pair of eyes. After reading everything, Chen Ji did not hurry to leave. He diligently recorded all the handwriting on his live stream. In a way, he was keeping evidence. The writing on the table was seemingly carved by the girl who had been hurt by Teacher Fan. The eyes inside the toilet had traumatized her deeply. That, combined with Teacher Fan's other actions, pushed her to seek help from this cursed classroom. After she paid her dues, Fin Yu's parents really disappeared. In a way, those eyes that haunted her were indeed dealt with. Chen Ji realized the sealed classroom played a key role in the whole process. In other words, Teacher Fan's real killer might have been the things that resided in this classroom. The paper notes with 3 different sets of handwriting belonged to 3 people who didn't exist among the existing student roster and had the capability to kill. If the ghosts inside this classroom were the killers, they did fulfill the 3 criteria perfectly. Chen Ji looked around him, and his heart started to waver. He was reminded of the group photo that Fan Yu's aunt had shown him. He might be dealing with more than 1 or 2 ghosts. Perhaps a whole classroom of ghosts was trapped there. Chen Ji turned to inspect other tables, and he realized that something was written on each table. Every table is carved with words, but the handwriting are all different. When Chen Ji moved toward the next table, he accidentally knocked into the table on which the textbook, paper, and pen sat. The pen rolled off the edge and fell to the floor. When Chen Ji bent down to pick it up, an arm from beside the table reached out to pick up the pen and hand it to Chen Ji. "Thank you." Chen Ji accepted it and replied on reflex. However, as he straightened up to replace the pen on the table, he froze. A surge of chills climbed up his spine. Where did the arm come from? He aimed his mallet at where the arm had been, but it only made contact with air. He looked around, and the sealed classroom was the same as he remembered. The tables and chairs around him remained unchanged, but Chenji's gaze did change. There's a classroom at the end of the corridor that's always sealed. No one ever enters it, but every night the classroom will come alive with activity, and it's almost midnight. The mission description crossed his mind. Just the thought of it made him shiver. Surrendering the mission, Chenji just wanted to get out of the classroom as fast as he could. The closer he was to the door, the more anxious he became. He anticipated that the door would close at the final moment and he would turn to see the whole classroom filled with people. Chenji picked up pace and rushed through the door. Thankfully, what he feared did not happen. Looks like this side mission is not accomplishable. Chenji looked at the classroom and realized the rumors were probably real. The whole class had turned into ghosts and stayed to haunt the place. After closing the classroom door, before he could catch a break, Chenji lowered his head and saw something that gave him the shock of his life. There was another set of footprints outside the classroom beside him. The person seemed to have stopped in front of the classroom for a long time before leaving. These look like the prints of rubber shoes. This person came prepared. When he was inside the sealed classroom investigating, there was another individual watching him from outside the window. Chenji felt scared. If something had happened to him inside the classroom and he had run toward the door, said person could have easily locked him in from outside. Gripping the mallet in his hand, Chenji soon calmed down. Footprints can't be hidden that easily. I'll need to find this person first before I decide what to do. He followed the footprints, and the other person did not seem like they were planning to hide. The trail of footprints was clear, like they were waiting for Chenji to come find them. Chenji followed the trail up to the third floor, and he realized that the prints entered the toilet. He put away his phone and slowly pushed the toilet door open. There was a woman in raincoat standing before the fifth cubicle. She looked slender and weak, like she could crumble at any moment. Whether you're a human or a ghost, you're not leaving here until you give me an explanation, Chenji warned while maintaining a 3-meter distance from the person. After a long time, the woman removed the hood of the raincoat to reveal her face. I really didn't think you would come here. I'm here to save you. The woman who appeared at Muyang High School at midnight was Fan Yu's aunt. Save me. Chenji did not believe her fully. Fan Yu's aunt was still a suspect. He had not forgotten about the woman's insistence on giving him that glass of water. Yes, I saw Fan Yu's drawing. The woman peeled out a wrinkled piece of paper from inside her raincoat. You are inside the drawing. Place it on the floor and take a few steps back. Fan Yu's aunt dropped the drawing and retreated to stand beside the 6th cubicle. Chenji's suspicion toward the woman lowered since she was so cooperative. He walked forward to pick up the drawing. There was a black building on the paper. The building was filled with red humans, but standing apart from the rest, as if the red humans were afraid to be near it, was an extremely conspicuous black man. You said that I am inside the painting. What is your evidence? Of course, Chenji would not buy her story with just a single painting. The people inside Fan Yu's painting have always been red in color. In fact, this is also the first time I have seen a black figure. I thought about it for a long time and deduced that you have to be this black person because in the past month, you are the only outsider who has been to our house. Fan Yu's aunt stood in the corner of the room, the rain on her raincoat dripping onto the floor, creating an uncomfortable rhythm. That's all. Then what is the meaning of these red people? What is the difference between the red and the black people? Fan Yu's eyes studied Chenji silently. Just as Chenji thought the woman would not tell him the truth, she suddenly said, the red figures represent ghosts, and since I've only seen one black figure, I assume it represents a living human. Ghosts. I know you won't believe it, but certain things in this world are inexplicable, Fan Yu's aunt said calmly like she had rehearsed this speech many times already. Before the accident that happened to Fan Yu's parents, I knew the boy could see things that normal people couldn't. I told his parents, but they didn't believe in things like ghosts. Since they didn't believe it, why do you? Chenji's curiosity was piqued. Initially, no one knew that Fan Yu has this power until my husband and 2 children passed away in a car accident. That was the darkest period of my life. I would collapse whenever I saw their picture. Should that happen, Fan Yu would come to me with his drawings. 2 small red children living inside a black house, and he would tell me that the red children are his brother and sister. The woman's eyes softened with warmth. Naturally, I did not believe him initially. I assumed he was merely trying to make me feel better. But as the number of his drawing increased, my conviction started to shake. I would ask Fan Yu what his brother and sister were doing, and his description would be incredibly detailed. Sometimes, he even mentioned little habits of my children that only a mother would notice and know. That was when you believed Fan Yu can see ghosts. Yes, or I admit perhaps I wish that it is real. Sometimes, I even see my own child possessing Fan Yu's body. Even if what you're saying is true, a child's painting still represents nothing. Don't tell me every human that appears in his drawing will die. Chen Ji asked cautiously. You can turn over the paper to look underneath it. Following her instruction, Chen Ji turned the paper over. There was another drawing. This time, it was the painting of an old well. Inside the well, several figures that were redder than usual were climbing out, while a black person stood beside the well. Interestingly enough, the location of the black figure inside the well painting overlapped with the black person's position in the black house on the other side. According to legend, there is an old well at this school that has claimed many lives. The ghosts inside the well are coming out, and you're standing beside it, meaning you've been targeted by the ghosts. If you stay here any longer, accidents might happen, Fan Yu's aunt said sincerely. It did sound like she was concerned for Chen Ji. Touching the paper, Chen Ji stared at the drawings for a long time. He frowned slightly as he compared the two drawings, and an answer settled in his mind. Looks like I've misunderstood you. Chen Ji put Fan Yu's painting in his pocket, a nonverbal signal that he was not going to return it. Since I'm planning to leave, let's go together, this way we can watch each other's back. This place gives me the creeps. You're right. Fan Yu's aunt nodded as she walked toward Chen Ji. Chen Ji seemed to have trusted her fully. He turned to walk away, exposing his defenseless back to the woman. The pair walked one in front and one at the back. Chen Ji walked very slowly, holding his mallet. Fan Yu's aunt behind him seemed to fear being left alone, and she slowly increased her speed. If someone was in front to see Chen Ji's expression, they would be shocked to see how calculative the glow in his eyes was. As the distance between them drew closer, as Fan Yu's aunt was about to reach Chen Ji, the slender woman showed a face that was suddenly different from before. Her face was tense, and her hand underneath the raincoat, which was carrying something, reached out to stab Chen Ji. I knew you are suspicious. Chen Ji's reaction was faster than she had anticipated, and the man was crueler than she had thought. The mallet went for her hand, and a kick came soon after. Bang! After Fan Yu's aunt was knocked into the toilet's wall, the thing in her palm clattered to the floor. Chen Ji walked toward her and saw it was a paring knife. The thing was small and was normally used to bone meat, an extremely sharp implement. Her hair falling all over her face, Fan Yu's aunt crawled up from the ground like a vicious ghost. However, Chen Ji did not give her any chance to counter and helped her to the floor again. I've suspected you since I visited your place, but I could not find any proof. Now, you've finally shown me your true face. The difference in strength was obvious. Fan Yu's aunt tried several times but could not get up. All she could do was glare at Chen Ji hellishly. How did you find out? From the very beginning, I didn't trust you, and this drawing provides me with the crucial evidence. The drawing on the back was drawn by your hand. Do you think a child's art is that easily mimicked? Don't look at me like that, you're the one who made the mistake. If you don't want to get exposed, don't do the evil deed in the first place. Chen Ji picked up the paring knife from the floor, and the blade glinted coldly in the dark. You're the one who killed Fan Yu's parents, right? Regardless of your reason, how could you kill your own family in cold blood? It was never my intention to kill. You have no idea what really happened that night. Fan Yu's aunt lashed out at Chen Ji. That is true, but one thing's for sure, you are one of the killers. Chen Ji was considering how to immobilize the woman while waiting for the police to arrive. The real killer is Fan Yu's father. You're pushing the blame onto a dead man. That is your argument. After making sure that Fan Yu's aunt had no more sharp weapons on her, he relaxed slightly. It's true. Fan Yu's aunt collapsed to the floor, and the truth from years ago finally came out of her lips. You must know by now what kind of sick bastard my brother was. It was inside this exact toilet that he caused an innocent girl to go crazy. In the end, I heard that the girl was forced to commit suicide. After that happened, my brother became even more unhinged and increasingly paranoid, often claiming that someone was out to get him. My sister-in-law finally could not stand it and filed for divorce. But my brother refused to let her leave. Forced into the corner, she threatened my brother, saying that if he didn't agree to the divorce, she would expose his crimes to the world. Then what was your brother's response? An originally mentally unhinged person who was haunted, Chen Ji expected such an individual to resort to extreme action when threatened, and what Fan Yu's aunt said next confirmed his speculation. Weirdly enough, after her threat, my brother calmed down. He considered it for a whole afternoon before relenting to her demand. The expression on Fan Yu's aunt's face was complicated. In retrospect, he was probably figuring out a way to kill her instead of considering the divorce. Things went as planned for my brother. It was raining cats and dogs the day that he locked Fan Yu up in his office and returned home alone. When we discovered that Fan Yu was not home, we assumed that the boy had gone missing, so all of us went out to go searching for him. My brother led his wife to Muyang High School. When I returned home at 9 p.m., none of them were there. I was worried, so I also headed for Muyang High School to go look for them. There was an old well on the hill behind the school. A few days before that, there had been a landslide caused by heavy rain, and the well had been buried. When I arrived, my brother was clearing the soil around the well. I didn't see my sister-in-law at first. I called my brother's name as I walked closer, and when I did, I saw her body stuck at the mouth of the well. I really didn't expect him to do something like that. He was such a gentle soul normally, and he really did love his wife. I realized then that my brother has lost his mind. Ever since he brought home that photo and said that he was haunted, I should have known that was the case. After I stumbled across the murder, I was given two choices. One was to help him cover up the body, and the other was to die. To save myself, I had no choice but to listen to him. As he ordered, I left some wounds on my sister-in-law's body and then helped him dig the well open. Fan Yu's aunt was leaning against the wall, and her eyes were filled with regret. I knew I had become an accomplice, but the scarier thing was that I didn't know when my brother would dispose of me. He definitely would not leave any witnesses alive. Perhaps after burying my sister-in-law, he would also toss me inside the well. So, you took the initiative and killed him first. Chen Ji listened to the woman's story quickly, and from his perspective, this whole family was abnormal. The husband was a peeping Tom, and after finding out about it, the wife did not report it to the police but used that as leverage to ask for a divorce. If I did not kill him, I would have been killed. And after killing him, I became Fan Yu's only family, and I did not need to share him with anyone else again. The last sentence was probably the only truthful word that left the woman's lips that night. But Fan Yu is not even your child to begin with. Chen Ji believed half of what Fan Yu's aunt had said. There was no way to confirm things that happened 3 years ago, and there was no one to counter Fan Yu's aunt. You're wrong. My children have possessed Fan Yu's body, and that is why he is familiar with my children's habits. Fan Yu is not only my brother's child but also my children. Green veins started to pop on the woman's face, and her lips were bleeding from the vehemence of her claim. Seeing her in this state, Chen Ji did not think it was wise to push her further. This woman said that her brother was crazy, but from how he saw it, she was not that normal herself. Her mind had probably snapped when her husband and children passed away in the car accident, and she applied her twisted love on Fan Yu when she realized the boy could see her children's lost souls. Looking at the distraught woman, Chen Ji was reminded of the mission description given by the black phone. Everyone has a deep well inside their heart where shameful and unknowable secrets stay buried. Get up, show me to the well where your brother's body was dumped. The well has already disappeared. After my brother shoved my sister-in-law down the well, I pushed him in. He broke his fall on top of my sister-in-law's body. He screamed and cursed from inside the well, but no one could hear him because of the heavy rain. Fan Yu's aunt pulled at her hair nervously, her arms continuously shaking. I filled the well up with soil, and 3 years have passed since then. I don't even know where to start to look for the well. You only need to give me a general area, Chen Ji said in a normal tone, but it elicited a violent reaction from Fan Yu's aunt. No one will be able to find them. Memory struck the woman's heart like a knife and her expression twisted with ferocity. I will raise Fan Yu alone, I will give him all the love he needs. If you really love Fan Yu, you wouldn't have done this. Your love benefits only yourself, it's incredibly selfish. When they were at the haunted house, he had noticed that Fan Yu preferred talking to Chen Ji, a stranger, than deal with his aunt. It was obvious that they did not share a good relationship. You said that the period after your family's accident was the darkest moment of your life. It was Fan Yu who came to you with comfort by offering you the drawings of your children. He helped you out of sincerity, but you killed his father. Chen Ji was reminded of the small house that was filled with red figures. If he had not intervened then, things might have gone down a far worse and far crueler route. You should be glad that Fan Yu is still a child. Facing the punishment of the law would be good for both Fan Yu and his aunt. Fan Yu was searching for heaven inside the well, which meant that he had witnessed everything. He knew his aunt was the real killer. As he grew older, he might have repeated what his aunt had done, and with blood on his hands, his life would have been ruined. It's time to give this tragedy its closure. After ending the livestream, Chen Ji had called the police. With regards to the kind of punishment Fan Yu's aunt would receive, he really had no clue. The boy is forced to live with the killer of his parents. No wonder his psychological development is so stunted. You are the cause of his symptoms. When Chen Ji called the police, Fan Yu's aunt shook her head vehemently, and her lips moved before she ran toward the toilet door. Stop struggling. Chen Ji followed behind her. He was afraid that she might do something stupid. Two of them ran to the first floor. When they passed the sealed classroom, Fan Yu's aunt suddenly tripped and stayed on the ground for a long time. It felt like someone had yanked on her leg. It was weird to say the least. Chen Ji stopped several meters behind her. Fan Yu's aunt was collapsed at the door to the sealed classroom, and Chen Ji was feeling apprehensive about this particular classroom. He stuck his back to the wall opposite from the door and leaned to peek into the classroom. It was after midnight. The empty classroom was filled with students, and an old, rotund man was standing at the lectern. Like and subscribe.